What is going on, Only Playbook fans? We are back. Championships are over. If you play a Week 18 championship, I have one advice for you. Tell your commissioner to stop that, because very few places are going to give you advice for Week 18 because it is a shit show. So we have to recap Week 17. I don't know that I want to recap it. I might just let Shishote take over, drive the whole episode, and I'll just sit in a corner. But lo and behold, Shishote, the guy who had the best team from week one, just consistent as it gets, ends up pulling up the dub. First championship since 2015, Shishote. So
yeah, in this league, there's plenty of championships every single year, but this league, there was a big drought, and we've quenched that thirst.
Yeah. How does it feel, man? How does it feel? It almost feels... I don't know how it feels. I'm going to ask you because it felt like you almost should have won it from the beginning and you won it. So there was just no real surprise for everybody else.
I told you guys, like, when the playoffs began, I was like, it's a little stagnant because I didn't really change my lineups much because I didn't really have many injuries to deal with. And then all of a sudden, I was playing 7-on-9 in the semifinals and then injured right before the day of. My second ranked running back goes down and my number one tight end's no longer there. So, the whole philosophy here is from the same philosophy since our mock draft since week one. And that's, you got to have a bench. You got to be prepared with a depth all throughout the season. You can't, like, if one injury happens, there's got to be a next man up, especially in the playoffs. And that was the whole philosophy till the end. And that's literally the only reason I survived was because of that. So.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the whole depth thing is I absolutely agree with you. I just happened to be caught on the other end of depth in my other league where I had too much depth. And then when you have too much depth, you're like, who do I start? And then you start the wrong guy, So I was also thinking about Shovet, your and I Olave versus Pacheco trade. Yeah. And, again, the ripple effects of that. Olave was great all the entire time of the trade. And then in the absolute finals when I needed him, Pacheco drops like 30 and Olave drops like 3. So, and then the Devontae Adams situation. Started him last week in one league, benched him last week in one league, 0.9 points. And going into championship weekend, I just don't know how anybody had confidence in starting him. And then he drops a 32 burger, right? So I think all of that to say that you can take away things, but at the same time, I also don't really know what I learned because I felt like I played the game pretty well from start to finish. And at the end, the cards just kind of played how they played out. So I don't know if you should show it as somebody who avoided the Sacco. Luckily, you won your final matchup. So congrats on not winning the Sacco. What did you learn? Aside from the fact that it sucks having a shit ton of injuries, because
no, it sucks, man. But I think that a lot of it, like you use all your skills to get to the playoffs, and at the playoffs, like you just never know what's gonna happen, and a lot of it has to do with luck, right? Getting to the playoffs is skills, and then after that, you just kind of hope for the best and hope that CeeDee Lamb doesn't score 40 points on you or some.
For sure, bro. I mean, that's why I made it to the finals 9 times and only won 3 times. Like you can only do so much, right? I do have a couple of basically things I learned. It's just a rapid fire, things that you should kind of keep a note of for next year or whatever, like basically tips at the end of the year. I'm just going to go through them real quick. You said, how are you feeling? I feel relieved. That's the best way I can think of. I got my life back. I have time for things. I'm excited for this. It's like winning the championship. Anybody, what are you doing next? I'm going to Disneyland. Well, I want to have a normal life. So that's how I feel. I'm excited that fantasy football is over. Number 2, you have to be willing to reach in these drafts, right? Like people get too complacent on ADP and everything. ADP is just a suggestion by some guy that created it. It doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, you want to go get certain players that other people are, may get later. Then they may be gone when you really want them. Get them early. That's number 1. Number 3, know when to drop somebody, right? Like you're not having a daycare in your bench, right? Like you can only keep Kareem Hunt in your bench for so long until you realize you're never going to use them, right? So know when to drop someone. That's a big one. And then know when someone's floor is nice enough to fill in for a buy, which is also Kareem Hunt, right? So it's the same philosophy. You have to make those decisions, and decision making is when people start panicking and going on podcasts and asking us, what do we do? Do I start Rachaad White or do I start blah, blah, blah? You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to make those decisions, and you got to kind of like stop beating yourself over that. And then the next one is draft consistency, right? We get a little cute sometimes. We're like, oh, the hottest name in the game is I want that guy on my team because I want everybody to know that I knew that he was going to go. It doesn't do anything for you at the end of the season, right? Get somebody unsexy that will get targets. For example, TJ Hawkinson. I had to reach to get that guy on my team because towards the end of the year previously, I saw that Kirk Cousins loves this guy. He just loves him. He's going to get me 10 targets a game. get them. Go get them, right? It's consistency. You need consistent targets. And then believe in your methods, right? Like you're going to hear things from this guy, that guy. Oh, well, he got 21 points last week. You're going to bench the 21 pointer next week. Yeah, if the matchup's right, and if it's in my heart, and I'm not going to beat myself up over my decisions. That's number one. Honestly, that is number one. You cannot let a decision change your decision the next time up. Every week is a new week. It's a new game. There's no connection to last week. There's nothing. So players' trends matter if you're using like quarterbacks, like tendencies to throw to the right side more than the left side. Those things matter. But if you're saying like, oh, he scored 3 straight weeks, I'm not going to bet somebody that scored 3 straight weeks. I don't give a shit. Doesn't mean anything. He could easily not catch a touchdown. Touchdowns, depending on touchdowns, is like a loser mentality. And then last but not least, literally final piece of advice. Fantasy is a lot like health. It's like your health, right? You can't smoke and drink and expect to live to 90. Right? Some people sneak by and they'll do it, right? Sure. Congratulations. You did it. You cheat death till 90 years old. Good job. Same thing with fantasy. If you're not going to wake up at 3 a.m. to fix your waivers, if you're not going to, wake up Sunday morning after a night out drinking, if you're not going to listen to our podcast, whatever the case is, the chances of you making the finals is not as high as the guy that's doing it. So you got to put in work. You don't get to make the playoffs without putting in work.
Sounds like dodgeball, right? Like you can't dodge a ranch, can't dodge a dodgeball.
You can't.
If you don't wake up, you're not going to win.
Right.
I think those are all great, valid points. And I agree. Imagine being in a league with the three of us, knowing that we have a podcast, knowing that we're just giving out free advice, and people just still don't listen, and then still make the wrong decisions, and then still wonder why they don't win. And you're just like, man, the equation is in front of your face. Maybe if you could just put 2 and 2 together. Just show. Go ahead, Shove it.
No, the one that really sticks out is like picking the player that's not that has a better name or better pedigree than that is consistent. Like, for example, Michael Pittman is a guy that like I don't want to draft Michael Pittman, especially with like the quarterback situation, Anthony Richardson, whether or not he can get it to him all the time, and with Gardner Minshew, but that's a guy that's consistent, that gets points week in, week out, and so that's a solid point that you made there.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid thought, because I guess the emotional side of fantasy football is you're always going to have a attachment or a stigma or some sort of notion to every player that's been on your team or hasn't been on your team. You've traded them away, or you forgot to draft them, you want to draft them, et cetera, right? So there's always this preconceived notion with a lot of players. And if you play this long enough, you're just like, oh, that's a guy that I know is always going to do good, but I'm never going to draft. And there's so many of those players. And you just want like Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy that I'm just stupid and never draft. I'm just like, it's fine. Like he'll do good. I just don't want him. And he was a top 5 wide receiver this year. And I'm looking back like, man, I'm an idiot. So there's guys that you just have to do away with what you're, because you said week to week, like there's people that have seasons on seasons of the same notion in their brain showed, and you're over here like, no, bro, week 16 and week 17, the situation completely different. So I think, again, taking a even further lens back, right? Season to season, Devontae Adams, for me, prime example, dude's a freaking god, one of the best receivers of our lifetime. And I think for that reason alone, for me, the emotional side of that draft, I can remember it to this day. I'm like, can I pass up Devontae Adams and sit all season with Shishot having Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, and then me being like, I just handed him the championship? That was my thought process. And I was like, there's just no world where I could do that. I'm like, naturally, I'm going to take Devontae. I wanted Devontae, but again, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So I think the season played out really organically in a way, because again, start to finish, you had the best team. I don't think there was a week where maybe you weren't on top, unless it was like the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks in the season. But you might have been number 1 seed for the length of the
week 4 is when it switched over.
Yeah.
I think Shovit and you beat me. And then after that, I didn't lose until.
And then JJ went down, and the rest is history.
So from week 4 on, every week it was basically you had the best team. And at what point were you going to slip up? Was a player going to get hurt? Was your team just going to underperform or something like that? And it truly didn't happen, man. And kudos to you. Again, like you talked about the reaching, you reached for Rachaad White, and he was one of the best running backs in football. You reached for TJ Hawkinson. He was the number 2 tight end if he didn't get hurt, number 1 tight end if he didn't get hurt, right? So you got to be the ones. That's the saying. And Shishot was the epitome of that this year. So I think you definitely deserved it. So let's start off with you. What was your favorite pick of the entire draft for you across all leagues?
CeeDee Lamb. I won 2 out of 3 fantasy football leagues, and the 3 things in common in both those leagues: CeeDee Lamb, TJ Hawkinson, Rachaad White.
And those were all 3 were top 3 finishers at their position.
Yeah. Well, Rashad White, I think, dropped to 4, and I think TJ Hawkinson may have ended up 3 or 4 because of the injury. But yeah, that's it. Like, you have to know what you're going into the draft. Like, prepare for the draft, know what you want. If you're just going in there for shits and giggles to have a beer, congratulations on your first round exit, or like you're possibly not making the playoffs. Like, we're not playing around here. This isn't a game.
I just got a flashback. You weren't there for the draft last year, show, but in the first round, Sonnes was trying to look for Deebo Samuel. He was like, I don't see Deebo Samuel's ADP here. Like, I want to try to take him at 4. And we're like, are you talking about Deebo Samuel or Deebo Samuel? He's like, no, Deebo Samuel. Like, where's Deebo Samuel? And we were just laughing hysterically. And so that's the guy that's coming in for a beer when he's trying to get Deebo Samuel in the first round. Sorry, Sonnes, I love you, bro. But anyways, favorite pick, CD Lamb, pretty straightforward. Shove it across your fantasy football leagues. What was your favorite draft pick that you hit on?
Yeah, so my favorite pick was Sam Laporta, drafted 170th, 14th pick, finished as tight end number 1, averaged like 14.2 PPR points per game. So I think that was solid because this year tight end was tough, right? Like, people are drafting Travis Kelce, not getting what they want from Kelce, and Mark Andrews even got injured. So Sam Laporta was a nice kind of, just productive, consistent.
In a spot where nobody else is getting points,
Yeah. And Sam Laporta is not a guy that people typically drafted either. He definitely went off the draft boards and was a guy that people may picked up on waivers. And he was a nice addition this year for me.
Yeah, I would say that's a home run of a hit in the 14th round. For me, it was pretty straightforward. My team, I would say Josh Allen was my favorite pick just because he was the most consistent pick. Pretty much every week in and week out, he pretty much had a solid floor. The rushing upside, the fact that they moved to more of a running offense actually helped him because he started getting push touchdowns like Jalen Hurts. So if that's taking next year, if that's kind of what next year's looks like, then Josh Allen's going to be QB1 again, man. 4 years in a row, Allen QB2, QB1, QB1, QB1. So, I mean, there's no quarterback in fantasy football across the last 4 years that has been there. And I went into the draft not thinking I was drafting quarterback, but again, the situation, he fell to me. And so for me, that was my favorite pick. Yeah. And let's go on to the flip side. My least favorite pick was 2 rounds after that. I took Mr. Cam Akers, who's not even on a football team right now. Man. So he was my worst pick. But what's crazy about that is at the end of the season, I still had the Rams starting running back, and he was still a top 5 running back. Yeah, it just happened to be Kyren Williams. So that was my year. He's gonna be a first round pick. It's gonna be insane. He was the best running back behind CMC. I think he was second in rushing yards, missing 4 or 5 weeks. So pretty insane the season that he had. Shove it. What was your least favorite pick?
My least favorite pick is Najee Harris in the 5th round, man. I wish that I would have just I had this whole receiver strategy went 3 receivers. I was like, I'm done. But I wish I had gotten like 4 or 5 receivers and not even looked at running backs. But Najee Harris was not consistent. Towards week 16 and 15, he had a really good game. The rushing game is doing really well for the Steelers. But man, the beginning of the season.
If you had him at that point, you probably weren't even in the playoffs, so it didn't matter, right?
Yeah. As like RB1 or 2, he was just not it, and the Steelers' offense in general just was not it this year.
That's a great example, Shishot, of ADP. Najee Harris actually's ADP was in the 3rd round, and he fell to what, the 5th for us? Yeah, and at that point, Shove was like, dude, this is a steal. And ADP is a steal. But at the end of the season, was it a steal? No, it actually wasn't a steal, right? So 2 rounds later, where his ADP went, you were like, dude, 5th round, Najee, starting running back, you got to take him. But man, that's a really good example of one that it just didn't really matter. What about you, Shishot? Did you have any bad picks?
Yeah, I did have a bad pick. My worst pick was probably Deshaun Watson. I went a little bit, he was like the next one after Herbert. I could have had some other better players out there. There's a couple of names that I got a little bit later, but I had a lot of bad picks in my other league. I went Deshaun Watson. I had Michael Thomas. I drafted Algier. I drafted Kareem Hunt. I drafted Mingo. None of those players on my team. If you look at the week 1 squad versus week 3 final week squad, the only thing consistent is Rashad White and Bijan Robinson and Chris Olave. So 3 players lasted all year long. And even then, I had to go to Bijan Robinson struggles early on. Chris Olave was injured a couple times. So it's a complete transformation from one team to a whole new team. Deshaun Watson, I went a little early, but I think next year I'm still going to get him. I still see this hint of possibly like a late round flyer that I'm just going to scoop up and just see what's going on. I don't think he wants to play football anymore, but I would like for him to.
Yeah, I mean, this is a way too early 2024 prediction, guys, but with the amount of rookie quarterbacks that I see getting drafted just in the first round alone, I think we're going to have like 20
Oh my God.
quarterbacks in the NFL that you could
For sure.
possibly start in fantasy football, because
sure.
the amount of quarterbacks now that are just rushing alone
Yeah.
is insane. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be a weird draft next year for sure. Biggest missed out opportunity for me is a no-brainer. You already talked about it. Is CeeDee Lamb. I just passed up CeeDee Lamb. I took Devontae Adams. I mean, again, looking back on it, my preseason rankings, I still had Adams over Lamb. So I followed the process that I believed in. So I think there wasn't a world where I was taking Lamb there. So it's one of those where I can't look back and be like, man, if I had taken Lamb, I wasn't taking Lamb, right? I wasn't going to take CeeDee Lamb. So that is by far the biggest missed out opportunity for me. Shove it. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's the second pick. I went with Jamar Chase instead of going with CMC, who finished number 1 as a running back, and Jamar Chase finished 9th. And a part of it was due to the fact that Joe Burrow got injured, right? And so that has a lot to do with it. But missing out on the number 1 player because I went with a receiver instead of CMC, it just sucks. So that was my missed opportunity.
Hey, join the club on back-to-back years where we passed up on CMC for another guy and he ended up being shittier. I took Jonathan Taylor. So maybe next year, one of us will learn not to pass up on CMC, and then it'll be the year where he's out for season after week 1.
Exactly.
What about you, Shout?
I mean, some of the players I was targeting got hurt early on. Like I wanted Nick Chubb. I was really upset I didn't get him towards the end. I wanted Tony Pollard, who I'm glad I didn't get him, right? Who's a bigger disappointment besides, without looking at ADP? Austin Eckler or Tony Pollard? Who really fucked shit up?
I
Tony
think Austin
Pollard.
Eckler.
So the reason I think, so we can make a case. The reason I think Tony Pollard is I think Austin Eckler still had like 4 or 5 weeks where he had 20 plus points, right? So he wasn't doom and gloom every single week. Tony Pollard, I don't know. If you look at Tony Pollard's game log, does he have how many 20 plus points? Oh, he has the worst red zone conversion rate of any player in the entire NFL. Rico Dowdle got, I think, 1/6 or 1/7 of the red zone carries that Pollard did and converted at a better rate. Yeah. So I think Eckler had 4 or 5 weeks where he had 20 plus fantasy points, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how many Pollard had. I had Pollard in my other league.
Week 1.
He had 1 week with 20 plus fantasy points?
Yeah, that was week 1.
Yeah. He's to me, he's the biggest bust.
To me, I'm saying Eckler because when you draft Eckler, you draft him. And I know you said taking ADP aside, no ADP, but like if you get him like the 3rd pick, which some people may have done, Pollard is more of a 2nd round guy. And so, your best player that just completely shits the bed like that, what you expect from your number 1 pick, you just didn't get that from Eckler. So,
yeah, I mean, I think they'll both for sure go down as the biggest busts for the year. I mean, that's really all I had. I wanted to, what's funny is when I drafted Cam Akers, the running backs that went after him are all just make me want to blow my brains out. You have James Cook, who you took, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, who you took, David Montgomery, who you took, Javonte Williams. So a lot of running backs there that ended up being just a lot better than him. But all in all, I thought it was a great year. I don't know that. Sometimes you look back at fantasy football, and again, I'm like, what can I take away? Like, if you guys are me, right? Put yourself in my shoes as in our league. Where do you think I can potentially get better? What could I have done differently?
Not going with the aging running back. I think that's a lesson I've learned. Actually, not going with aging anything. The chances of getting another, like who was the receiver that was kind of old that did pretty well?
Mike Evans,
Keenan Allen.
Mike Evans, Keenan Allen. Exactly, right? So those two guys, like, it's great when they do go off, but the chances of them going off at the rate that they did
as they get older,
at this age is minimal, right? So like if you don't want them that early, that's fine. But Mike Evans was going at a good pace, like he'd steal at his spot. But like Saquon Barkley in the late first round, aging running back. That's like a death sentence now that I look back at what I did. I got Saquon Barkley and Devonta Adams, just like you did. You survived for a lot longer I did because you picked up Kyron Williams, made some good choices. And I lost in the playoffs in my IDP league because of those two guys. So, yeah, I think from moving forward, this year I actually started that philosophy in our league as far as, remember the pre-draft rankings. I went with James Cook, Khalil Herbert, and Rachaad White, right? At the end of the season, week 17, those 3 guys are on my roster. Somehow, some way, they ended up getting, on my roster. But that's the idea here. The idea is young, youthful running backs and reliable target-heavy wide receivers and a quarterback that can run and pass. You make a good top 5 tight end choice. You have to be smart to pick a good defense every week, and you pick a kicker that plays mainly indoors. Boom, playoffs. It's that easy. It really is that easy.
Yeah, if only Saquon didn't have Tommy DeVito and no name BS bogus. Yeah. His offense couldn't function for like half of the season. So, I mean, looking back, honestly, like Saquon had enough boom weeks where for as bad as his team was, he's like 95% usage for them. So it makes it hard for me to reconsider Saquon personally, but I agree with like, I wanted no stock. Yeah. I wanted no stock in Derrick Henry, which ended up working out, right? Yeah. Aging player, no stock in him whatsoever. I mean, I didn't personally want Nick Chubb. It's not like he was aging, but he's pretty much the same age as Barkley is. And he just happened to get hurt, which again, it's not like I knew he was going to get hurt, but you're right. I think you have to watch the 26 to 27 age range with running backs specifically, because that cliff comes so fast that Eckler, right? It came so fast where you just didn't even have like an ability to pivot. You're like, one week he's giving me 25 and all of a sudden he's like not used. And you're like, what's going on?
Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
But I think I don't want to take away from what you said about that strategy, because I really like that you picking the young players. But there's been years where like Derrick Henry has been the king and still.
I mean, there's exceptions. There's always exceptions, but this isn't about like going to find the exception.
I think that you're seeing the transition this year more clear, where it's like now the new guys like Kyron Williams, Bijan Robinson, James Cook, even like these guys are Rachaad White. They're kind of taking over, and these guys are guys we're going to be targeting next year. And maybe even Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs could still be relevant.
And what's common between all those receivers you mentioned? Not besides age. It's the fact,
Sorry, go ahead.
Usage.
Yes, but also catching the ball and running the ball. There is no such thing as just running up the middle with one guy anymore, right? Some teams will do that, and great, good for them. Continue that philosophy, I guess. But all those players you mentioned, the youthful players, they're moving. The NBA or the NFL is transitioning from just running outside, running inside to having multiple running backs, having a guy that can catch the ball. Catching the ball out of the backfield is like priority. If you're a running back and you can't do that, you're losing a huge aspect of the game. And same reason, if you have a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and run, and you have a quarterback that can run and throw, you're playing with 14 players while the defense only has 11. So it's a whole different game.
Yeah. Shout out to the biggest exception to that rule, who ended up having a historic season. 32-year-old running back Raheem Mostert doesn't give a shit about age, so he's just going to score 20 touchdowns in a year where he should already be retired and doing like youth charities and foundations. But here we are. So congratulations to him for being the exception to the rule. Anything else, guys? The season is over. We now have to. For you, you're relieved. For me, I'm just like, God damn it, I have to wait like 9 months before I can have a stab at winning the ring again. So different perspective for sure. But do you guys have any final words heading into the off season?
I'm glad I get to sleep in on Wednesday nights. This is gonna be great.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I enjoy as well, is the Wednesday mornings where I'm just not feeling like dog shit because it's been like 4 a.m. and I'm just like, oh my God. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Was an awesome season. Hope you guys won your championship. If you didn't, hope you guys learned a thing or two. We will be around for the off season. Obviously, probably one episode a week. We'll get creative. We'll have fun with it. We need to do our annual Jeopardy episode as well, where I put you guys to the knowledge. And then, we'll send out schedules and everything. Again, I'm Sweetcard. That is Shobit. That is Shashot. We are the Only Playbook. Thank you guys so much for a fantastic season.